I didn't expect the night to change anything. I was just killing time, scrolling through my phone in bed, half watching some stupid late-night show I wasn't even following. It was one of those evenings where everything felt paused. No big plans, no strong emotions, just that low hum of loneliness I'd gotten used to pretending didn't bother me. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hey, this is Noah. You helped me move today." I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Noah, the guy from the third floor. We'd crossed paths in the stairwell a few times before. Polite nods, quick hellos, but earlier that afternoon he'd knocked on my door, holding a half-collapsed cardboard box and looking mildly embarrassed. "Any chance you're strong enough to help me not drop this?" he'd asked. I was, and I did. That was it. Or at least, that's what I thought. I typed back, "Yeah, hey, everything okay?" The typing bubble appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. "Yeah," he finally wrote. I just realized I never actually said thanks. For the help. And for the company. Company. Interesting choice of word. I rolled onto my side, staring at the wall, replaying the afternoon in my head. The way he'd laughed when the couch leg got stuck in the doorway. The quiet moment in the elevator when neither of us reached for our phones. The way he'd looked at me. Not intense, not flirty, just present. I hadn't felt that in a while. Someone actually noticing me. "No problem," I replied. "You settling in, okay?" Another pause. Mostly, he wrote, though I may have underestimated how quiet a new apartment feels the first night. That landed closer to home than I expected. "Yeah," I typed. Silence can be loud. This time, his reply came quickly. "Exactly. So random question. Are you busy?" I hesitated. I wasn't busy. But admitting that felt like admitting more than I was ready to say. "Not really," I answered. "Would you want to come over for a drink?" he asked. Totally fine if not. I just figured I'd ask before the night got too late. I sat up, heart thumping harder than it should have for something so simple. 10 minutes later, I was standing in front of his door, hands shoved into my pockets like I was trying to keep myself from overthinking. He opened it almost immediately, like he'd been waiting right behind it. "Hey," he said, smiling in a way that felt careful but genuine. "Hey." His place smelled faintly like fresh paint and clean laundry. Boxes were stacked along the walls, half unpacked, like he'd only planned to stay temporarily, even though this was clearly home now. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, beers in hand, talking about nothing important. Work. Bad neighbors. How moving never gets easier no matter how many times you do it. At some point, the conversation slowed. Not awkwardly, just naturally. "I'm glad you came," he said quietly. I looked at him then. Really looked. And something in his expression made my chest tighten, not with panic, but with recognition. "I am too," I said. We didn't move closer. We didn't touch. But the space between us felt charged, like something had shifted just enough to be noticed. Later, when I walked back to my apartment, the hallway felt different. Warmer, less empty. I lay back in bed afterward, staring at the ceiling, realizing that for the first time in a long while, I wasn't dreading tomorrow. I wasn't sure what this was yet, but I knew I wanted to see where it went. I didn't see Noah for 2 days after that. Not in the hallway, not by the mailboxes, not even the sound of footsteps above me, which was ridiculous to notice, but I did anyway. Every time I unlocked my door, a small, irrational part of me wondered if he'd be there, leaning against the wall with that quiet smile, like this was already becoming a pattern. It wasn't. By the third evening, I convinced myself the whole thing had been nothing more than a friendly neighbor moment that I'd overanalyzed into something else. That happens to me sometimes. I feel something real, then immediately try to flatten it into something safer. I was in the kitchen making pasta when my phone buzzed again. "Noah, hey, random question. Do you like terrible movies?" I smiled before I could stop myself. "Me? Depends. How terrible are we talking?" "Noah, bad acting, predictable plot, zero shame." I glanced at the clock. Friday night, no plans. Same low hum of loneliness, but quieter now. "Me. I'm listening. He came over around 8, carrying a six-pack and an expression that looked both hopeful and uncertain, like he wasn't sure if he was crossing a line or just stepping closer to one. We didn't talk about the other night. Not directly. We didn't need to. It sat between us anyway, unspoken but solid. We watched the movie on my couch, knees almost touching. He laughed more than the movie deserved, and I caught myself watching his reactions instead of the screen. The way his eyes crinkled. The way he leaned forward during intense scenes like he cared how it ended. At one point, our hands brushed reaching for the same beer. Sorry, we said at the same time. He didn't pull his hand away right away. Neither did I. It wasn't dramatic, just a pause, a shared breath, a moment where something could have happened or not. Eventually, the movie ended. Credits rolled. The room felt quieter than before. Thanks for inviting me, he said, standing but not moving toward the door. Anytime, I replied, and meant it more than I was ready to admit. He hesitated. Then, do you want to grab coffee tomorrow? There's a place around the corner I've been meaning to try. My answer came too quickly. Yeah, I'd like that. Coffee turned into a walk. The walk turned into an hour of talking about things we usually saved for later. Past relationships, mistakes, the weird fear of starting over in your 30s when everyone else seems settled. I don't really do casual, Noah said at one point, hands tucked into his jacket pockets. I tried. It just made me feel disconnected, I nodded. Same. I either feel everything or nothing. There's not much middle ground. He stopped walking, looked at me. Can I be honest? He asked. Please. I feel something here. I don't know what it is yet, but I don't want to pretend I don't. The honesty of it hit harder than any smooth line ever could. I felt it settle in my chest. Heavy, grounding, real. I feel it too, I said, quietly, carefully. He smiled then. Not wide, not flashy, just real. When we eventually went our separate ways, I noticed how different the street looked in daylight. Less lonely, more open, like something had shifted without needing to announce itself. That night, lying in bed, I replayed his words over and over, not anxiously, not obsessively, but with a sense of calm I wasn't used to. Whatever this was, it wasn't rushed. It was unfolding. And for once, I was okay with not knowing exactly where it would lead. The next few weeks slipped into a rhythm I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Nothing dramatic. No big declarations. Just Noah and me, gradually occupying more space in each other's days. Morning texts that didn't demand immediate replies. Evenings that ended with, "You can stay if you want," said casually but meaning something more. We started cooking together without calling it dates. He'd bring groceries, I'd open a bottle of wine, and somehow we'd end up leaning against the same counter, shoulders brushing as if by accident. We talked while chopping vegetables, while waiting for water to boil, while standing too close in my small kitchen because neither of us bothered to step back. One night, he stayed late enough that the conversation slowed, and the apartment went quiet around us. The city noise outside softened, and I realized we hadn't turned on the TV once. I like this, he said, glancing around like he was referring to the room, or maybe to us, the quiet. Me too, I answered. That was the first time he stayed over. Nothing happened the way movies make it happen. No sudden kiss, no dramatic pull. We brushed our teeth side by side, both pretending it was normal. When we lay down, there was a careful gap between us, like we were testing whether closeness would feel natural or forced. It felt natural. Sometime in the night, I woke up to his arm draped loosely across my waist. Not tight, not claiming, just there. My first instinct was panic. Old habits, old fears, but it faded quickly. His breathing was slow and even, his forehead resting near my shoulder like it belonged there. I didn't move. In the morning, light filtered through the blinds, cutting soft lines across the bed. Noah stirred, then froze, clearly realizing where he was. "Hey," he said quietly. "Hey." He didn't pull his arm away right away. Instead, he studied my face like he was checking for signs of regret. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I am." Relief softened his features. He smiled, small and real. and leaned in just enough for our foreheads to touch. Not a kiss, not yet. Just confirmation. That day felt different, like something unspoken had been agreed on. Still, there were moments where I caught him watching me like he was measuring distance, emotional, not physical. One evening, as we sat on the couch, he finally said it. "I'm bad at the in-between," he admitted. "The part where you're not just friends, but not fully, whatever comes next." I took a breath. Me too. But I think that's where the honest stuff lives. He considered that, then nodded. "Okay, then let's not rush it. But let's not pretend either." A few days later, we stood in my doorway again, shoes on, jackets half-zipped. The same place this all started, only now it felt heavier with meaning. "I'm glad I knocked on your door that day," he said. "So am I." He leaned in then, not fast, not hesitant either, and kissed me. Soft, brief, enough to leave no doubt, but also no pressure. When he pulled back, his eyes searched mine like he was bracing for something. I smiled. "You can stay," I said, "if you want." He exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. "I want." That night, lying next to him, I realized how different this felt from the rushed connections I'd known before. There was no urgency to prove anything, no fear of being left behind, just two people choosing to be present. As sleep crept in, I held on to that thought, not as a promise, but as a quiet hope forming. And for now, that was enough. There's a strange intimacy that comes after the first kiss. Not the rush of it, but the quiet afterward, when you realize you've crossed something invisible and the world didn't end. If anything, it felt steadier, like things had snapped gently into place. Noah started leaving small traces of himself in my apartment. A hoodie draped over the back of a chair, a toothbrush in the cup by the sink. He never asked, just looked at me like he was checking if it was okay. Every time, I nodded. We still took things slow, but the closeness deepened, sitting closer on the couch, fingers brushing more often, less accidentally. One night, while we were cooking, he came up behind me to reach for the salt, and didn't move away right after. His chest pressed lightly against my back, his hand resting at my hip like it belonged there. "You all right?" he asked softly. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. He kissed my neck, brief, careful, and stepped back before the moment tipped into something heavier. I appreciated that more than I expected. The restraint. The respect. Still, there were parts of him I hadn't seen yet. The guarded edges. The history he hinted at but never fully explained. That came out one rainy afternoon when we stayed in. The city blurred into gray streaks outside the window. We lay on the couch, his head on my chest, my fingers tracing slow, absent lines along his arm. "I don't talk about my last relationship much," he said suddenly. I didn't move. "You don't have to." "I want to," he replied. "Just maybe not all at once." He told me about the way it ended, not dramatically, just painfully slow. About how he'd tried to be everything at once and lost himself somewhere along the way. How quiet resentment can feel louder than shouting. "I'm scared of repeating that," he admitted, "of waking up one day and realizing I disappeared again." I thought about my own patterns, how I'd learned to make myself smaller to avoid being left. "We can check in," I said, "with each other, out loud, even when it's uncomfortable." He lifted his head, studying me like he was weighing something important. "You'd really do that?" "I already am." That seemed to settle something in him. He relaxed back against me, his fingers lacing loosely with mine. Outside, the rain kept falling, steady and patient. A week later, he asked me to come to his place for dinner. Really asked this time. Candles. Music playing softly. Boxes mostly unpacked now. The apartment starting to feel lived in. Halfway through the meal, he reached across the table and took my hand. "I don't want to drift into this," he said. "I want to choose it." My chest tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. "I'm choosing it too," I replied. Later that night, we stood by his window, city lights stretching out below us. He slipped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. It felt easy, earned. I'm not perfect at this, he murmured. At us, I smiled. Good. Neither am I. We stayed there for a while, not talking, just breathing together. The future didn't feel overwhelming anymore. It felt possible. When I left, he kissed me slow and sure, his hands steady on my back. No rush, no doubt. Walking home, I realized something quietly profound. I wasn't bracing for the ending anymore. I was allowing myself to be here. And that, for me, felt like the bravest thing yet. The first crack showed up in the most ordinary way possible. It was a Tuesday. No build-up, no tension I could point to afterward and say, there, that's where it started. I came home late from work, drained in that dull, hollow way that makes even small talk feel like effort. Noah was already at my place, sitting at the kitchen table with his laptop open, sleeves rolled up, fully absorbed in something. Hey, I said, dropping my keys into the bowl by the door. He looked up, smiled. Hey, long day? Yeah. I waited for him to ask more. He didn't. Not right away. He went back to typing, fingers moving fast, focused. I told myself it was nothing. He didn't owe me constant attention. That was old thinking, the kind I was trying to unlearn. Still, something in my chest tightened. We ate dinner side by side, but not quite together, the conversation staying on the surface. Work stuff, a show he'd started, a neighbor who played music too loud. It wasn't bad. It just wasn't us. Later, when we were brushing our teeth, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Tired eyes, jaw clenched without realizing it. You okay? Noah asked, foam still on his toothbrush. I hesitated, then shrugged. Just tired, he nodded, accepting it easily. Too easily. The thing about choosing honesty is that it doesn't always show up when it's convenient. Sometimes it shows up when you want to be quiet and disappear into routine. That night, lying in bed, his back to my chest, I stared into the dark. My mind kept circling the same thought. If I don't say something now, I'll start storing it away. And I know where that leads. Noah, I said softly. He shifted, half turning. Yeah? Can I ask you something without it being a thing? He was quiet for a second. Then, okay, yeah. When you're here, I said carefully, are you here or are you just in the room with me? I felt him tense slightly. Not defensively, thoughtfully. That's fair, he said after a moment. I think I've been distracted lately. I waited. Didn't rush him. I get scared when things feel good for too long, he continued. Like I'm about to mess it up, so I pull back without meaning to. That landed harder than I expected, not because it hurt, but because it mirrored something in me. I do the opposite, I admitted. I lean in too quietly. I hope you'll notice without me asking. He rolled onto his side fully then, facing me. His hand came to rest at my waist. I don't want us guessing, he said. I want us checking. I nodded. Me too. We didn't fix anything in that moment. But something eased. Like a knot, loosening just enough to breathe again. A few days later, we went to a small dinner party at a friend of his place. Nothing fancy. Just people sitting on the floor, passing plates, talking over each other. I watched Noah move through the room with an ease I admired, laughing, listening, touching my shoulder now and then like a quiet anchor. At one point, someone asked how we'd met. Our apartments are stacked, Noah said, glancing at me. Turns out, that was a good architectural choice. I smiled. He squeezed my hand under the table. Walking home afterward, the city cool and quiet, I realized something subtle but important. The fear hadn't disappeared. It was still there. But it wasn't driving. When we reached my door, Noah lingered, like he always did. I'm glad you said something the other night, he said. So am I. He kissed me, slow, grounding, and rested his forehead against mine afterward. Inside, as we got ready for bed, the earlier tension felt distant, not erased, but integrated. Like proof that this wasn't fragile. Just human, lying there, Listening to his breathing even out, I let myself think forward, not to forever, not to guarantees, but to tomorrow morning. Coffee, light through the blinds, another chance to choose this again, and that felt steady enough to sleep. The first real test didn't come as a fight. It came as distance, not emotional distance, schedule distance. Noah's workload ramped up suddenly, some deadline he hadn't expected when he took the project, late nights, early mornings, texts that came with apologies attached. I told him I understood, and I did, mostly, but understanding doesn't cancel feeling. We started missing each other by hours instead of days, passing like ships, his jacket gone when I woke up, mine hanging by the door when he came in. We'd collapsed into bed together, exhausted, exchanging a few quiet words before sleep took over. One night, after a week of this, I caught myself rehearsing disappointment in my head, making it smaller, manageable. That scared me more than the distance itself. So when he showed up unexpectedly on a Thursday evening, knocking on my door instead of texting, I knew something was up. "I bailed early," he said, breathless like he'd rushed. "Couldn't stand another night of just waving at you in passing." I stepped aside to let him in. He looked tired, but determined. We didn't sit right away. We stood in the living room, facing each other, coats still on, like this was a conversation that needed gravity. "I don't want us to drift just because life gets loud," he said. "And I know I've been elsewhere." I nodded. "I know why. I just don't want to get quiet about it." He reached for my hands, grounding himself. "Then don't, please." So I didn't. I told him how easy it was for me to disappear emotionally when I felt sidelined. How I needed reassurance. Not constant, just intentional. He listened without interrupting, his thumbs moving slowly against my knuckles like he was anchoring the moment. "I'm not going anywhere," he said when I finished, "but I need you to tell me when it starts to feel that way, even if it feels small." "It won't feel small to me," I replied. "That's enough," he said. "That's the whole point." We ordered takeout and ate on the floor, backs against the couch like the early days. The conversation drifted back to lighter things, but the air between us felt clearer, like we'd opened a window we didn't know was stuck. Later, as we lay tangled together, I realized something had changed. Not dramatically, subtly. We weren't just reacting to each other anymore, we were adjusting. A month later, we took a weekend trip out of the city. Nothing fancy, just a small coastal town, one shared suitcase, and no real plans. The ocean was loud, the air sharp and clean. We walked for hours, hands brushing, then holding, then staying that way without thinking. That night, wrapped in a thin motel blanket, listening to waves crash somewhere beyond the walls, Noah traced slow circles on my arm. "I've never been good at letting something be solid," he said quietly. "I always expect the drop." I turned toward him. "Maybe solid doesn't mean unchanging. Maybe it just means we keep choosing to stand." He was quiet for a long time after that. Then he nodded once. In the morning, light spilled across the room, pale and forgiving. We packed up slowly, unhurried. No rush to leave. No dread about going back. Driving home, his hand rested on my thigh, steady and warm. I looked out at the road ahead and felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Not certainty, not fantasy, trust, not in the future, in the present. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The moment I realized this wasn't temporary came quietly. No announcement. No dramatic swell of music in my head. Just a Sunday morning where nothing felt urgent. Noah was still asleep, sprawled across my side of the bed like he'd forgotten there was another option. His hair stuck up in the back, his mouth slightly open, breathing deep and unguarded. I watched him longer than I probably should have, noticing the small things, the faint line between his brows even in sleep, the way his hand curled loosely around the edge of the pillow. This wasn't the version of him he showed the world. This was the version you only got when someone felt safe. Careful not to wake him, I slipped out of bed and made coffee. The apartment filled with the familiar smell, grounding and warm. When I brought 2 mugs back to the bedroom, he was awake, blinking up at me like he'd been dropped into the moment without warning. "You look suspiciously domestic," he said, voice rough. "Don't ruin it," I replied, handing him a mug. He sat up, pulling the blanket around his waist, and took a sip. His shoulders relaxed immediately. I could get used to this. I sat beside him, back against the headboard. You already have. Later that day, we walked through the neighborhood, hands linked without thinking. At one point, we passed a couple arguing quietly on the sidewalk, voices tight, bodies angled away from each other. I felt Noah's grip on my hand firm slightly, instinctive. Hey, I said softly. He looked at me. Sorry, reflex. It's okay, I replied. We're allowed to be affected by what we've lived through. He nodded, thoughtful. I like that you don't rush me past things. I like that you don't shut me out, I said. That felt like the truth of us. Not perfection. Not constant ease. Just mutual effort, visible and real. That night, lying together, his head on my chest, he spoke into the quiet. I don't know what this looks like in 5 years, he said. I ran my fingers through his hair. Me neither. But, he added, tilting his head to look at me, I know what it feels like right now. I met his gaze. Yeah, me too. A few weeks later, he officially moved the rest of his things in. Not in one big gesture, just boxes carried down the stairs over several evenings, laughter echoing in the hallway. When the last one was set down, he stood in the middle of the living room and turned slowly, taking it all in. So, he said, guess this is home. I felt something steady bloom in my chest. Not fireworks, not nerves, just rightness. Yeah, I said, it is. That night, after everything was unpacked and put away, we lay together in the dark, the apartment quiet around us. His hand rested over my heart, feeling it beat. You still scared? I asked. He thought for a moment. Sometimes? Me too. He smiled against my skin. But not enough to leave. I closed my eyes, letting that settle. Not as a promise, not as a guarantee, but as a shared decision, made again and again. The world outside kept moving. Things would change. They always did, but here, in this moment, with his weight warm against mine and the future no longer something I feared naming, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. And for the first time in my life, that felt like home.